Hi, everyone. My name is Lillie. I'm an alcoholic. Thank you for asking me to come and share. It's always an honor and a privilege to come and share my story with anybody, although I must say that I like to tell this little story. My sponsor, my last sponsor, who recently passed away, always told me that I had a job to do, and that was to go and let you know that AA was alive and well in the grand state of Maine. And for 15 years, I took care of my mother. And just before I'd leave, it'd be about 3 in the morning, I'd go in and kiss my mother goodbye. And she'd open her eyes and say, tell me one more time, what is it you're going to say that they're going to pay your way to go all the way to Tennessee to say it? So I had one that was boosting me up and one that was keeping me right size. So thank you once again for asking me to come and share. And I wish you all a very Merry Christmas. My sobriety date is November the 8th, 1989. I had my last drink of alcohol on October the 28th, 1989. And I'll tell you, when I tell you my story, you'll realize why I call November 8th my sobriety date. I belong to the Scarborough Route 1 group. We meet in Scarborough, Maine when we do meet, which hopefully we'll get together again soon. But in the meantime, we're on Zoom. We meet at 7 o'clock, and I put the information in the chat. So if you want to come to our meeting, you'd be more than welcome. We have a very active group. Most of the members in our group show up for the business meetings. Just about everybody in our group has a job. There's plenty of jobs to be had. So anyway, if you have a mind to, please come and visit us in Scarborough. We'd love to see you. So I didn't come from a dysfunctional home. I came from a very normal home. I hear you people speak and say that you came from a dysfunctional home, but my home was comprised of a mom and a dad and 2 grandmothers and 5 kids. And my mother was a stay-at-home mom. She stayed home every day and did the things that mom do, cooked and cleaned and ironed. And, I remember my fond memories that, every single night about 3:30, Mama would go upstairs and she'd fix her hair and put some lipstick on, put on a clean apron and be downstairs. My dad would walk in at 4 o'clock and say to her, hi, honey, how was your day? And then he'd want to know where us kids were. And that's my childhood. I don't remember my parents fighting. They may have had a drink occasionally on, Christmas or some occasion. If they had company, they might have a drink. But to my knowledge, nobody in my immediate family is an alcoholic. I'm the lucky one. And I believe with all my heart that I am the lucky one. And the reason I say that is because I got to come to Alcoholics Anonymous and learn how to live with a new moral compass. And I am ever so grateful for that. I was brought up Catholic. I don't have anything against the Catholic Church. I'm still a Catholic in good standing, and I'm a firm believer that if you are dissing the religion of your childhood, you got some work to do. God didn't leave me. I left God. That's how that worked. And I remember we were kids. Tom will remember. We went to the same parochial school, and we studied the Baltimore Catechism, and most all of the kids in the class got the part about the mortal sin and you were going to go to hell. I didn't get that part. I got the part that God loved me no matter what. So I went with that. But all my friends that ended up in AA that went to that same school said they remembered the God that was going to punish them and they were going to go to hell. So that just tells you that I have a different perception from everybody else, and most of the time I still do. So, I had my first drink. I was 19 years old. The occasion was my wedding reception. I didn't know much about drinking. What I knew about drinking, I'd seen on TV. Lucy and Desi were going to cocktail parties. The reception was at the VFW, which 28 years to the day, I spoke there as a member of AA because it had become an AA club. But anyway, my dad walked me in and we went up to the bar and he said, what are you going to have? I don't know. What are you having? And he was going to have a whiskey and ginger. So I thought, well, if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. So I had the same thing. And what I knew about drinking, I had seen on TV. And when somebody toasted you, you drank what was in the glass. So he said, here's to you, kid. And I downed my drink. And it was whiskey and ginger. And it was a service club. So it's a lot of whiskey and a little bit of ginger. And the next thing I remember is taking my dress off on the front lawn. And that's the way my drinking was going to be. When I drank, I lost articles of clothing. It's just the way it was in my world, I didn't start out to be an alcoholic. I didn't plan to be an alcoholic, but what happened was I married way too young. I didn't know anything about married life. I didn't know how to compromise. I didn't know anything. It was either going to be my way or no way. And I found out after we were married that he was an alcoholic. I didn't even know what that was, and I figured it out one day because he used to sit on the floor. He never sat in a chair, always sat on the floor. And he got up and there was an outline of his body in beer cans. And I thought he might have a problem with drinking. But, I didn't really know. I was young and I just didn't know what I didn't know. And anyway, we had 4 children, but our second child died of SIDS. And he never recovered from that. He they went to get him at work and he wasn't there, and they found him in a bar, and he never forgave himself for that. And I'd like to say that he stopped drinking because of that, but he didn't. His drinking got worse. And it ended one night in a very violent fight between him and I. I'm not one to back down. I'll tell you, when I was brought, I have 4 brothers. I'm right smack in the middle. And they used to tease me unmercifully when I was a kid. And my grandmother took me aside one day and she said, Lily, if you want them to stop teasing you and making you cry, don't let them know you're afraid of them. And, I didn't realize it until I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, but that became my mantra. If I was afraid, I'd get in your face. You'd never know I was afraid. No way, no way, no way. And so on that last night we spent together, we tried to kill each other. And I'm not proud of that, but that's the truth of the matter is, he was trying to hurt me and I was trying to hurt him, and we were successful enough that both of us ended up in the hospital. And so there was a divorce in the making, and again, I wasn't equipped for any of that. I just wasn't equipped. And I moved back home with my parents, and I went to college because it became clear to me that he wasn't going to be able to support us because he was a chronic alcoholic and he was in the end stage of alcoholism. And I didn't know any of that meant. I remember when he tried to quit drinking while we were married, and I used to think to myself, well, I don't have a problem with drinking. He's the one that's got the problem, so I can have a drink. It never occurred to me that maybe I should, honor the fact that he wasn't drinking. I just didn't know what I didn't know. Anyway, after the divorce, I went to college. I bought a house. I had no business buying this house, but I bought it anyway. And now I could drink like I wanted to. And I would go out with my friends on the weekend. And a lot of times I didn't find my way home until the next day, and I used to make a big joke of it. I'd say, well, I didn't really say whether I was coming home at 1:00 in the morning or 1:00 the next afternoon, and I'm just, everything was a big joke, because I was an alcoholic and I didn't even know that I was an alcoholic, but I had that attitude that an alcoholic has. If you don't like the way I act, I don't really care. Go sit somewhere else, but anyway, now I could drink. And the problem became clear very soon that a lot of times I stayed out all night long, and I knew that wasn't fair. It wasn't fair to the babysitter, and it wasn't fair to my kids. And I came up with this plan, and I thought what I would do is I would get a 12-pack of beer and I would strategically place it around my backyard, and I would mow the lawn. And when I got to a beer, I'd stop and have one. And I did that, and an amazing thing happened because I drank all that beer and I was where I was supposed to be, and my kids were where they were supposed to be, and I mowed the lawn every day after that. And then in the fall, in Maine, this grass doesn't grow that fast, and so I raked leaves. And in the wintertime, I shoveled it. It was just an excuse to be out there drinking, and my drinking got worse. It got worse, and it got worse, and it got worse. And the problem is when you're a drunk like me, and you drink as much as I did, you got to get closer to the booze. I had a really good job when I got out of college. I got a job with the federal government, and I went in one day and I told the boss that I wanted a raise, and I needed a raise because I needed to get more money because I couldn't afford to pay for the amount of drinks I was drinking. And he told me that he wouldn't give me a raise, and I told him I quit. And, I heard about this saloon that was opening up the street from where I lived, and I always wanted to be a cowgirl. So I said, well, shit, I'll quit and I'll go be a cowgirl, and I went in there, and of course they hired me, I was full of it. And you had to dress up like a cowgirl with a jean skirt and cowboy boots and a cowboy hat. I had all the whole rig going. And I was driving at that time a 1972 Pontiac Ventura, and somewhere along the line, I lost the front seat in that car. I don't know what happened to that seat, but I have a very vague memory that we took it out. It was a bench seat, and we took it out to put around a campfire somewhere, but I'm not really sure that's the truth. I just know that somehow the seat disappeared. And the kind of people I hung out with knew that you couldn't drive a car without a seat. So we bolted a milk crate to the floor and put a pillow on it, put a piece of plywood up and then took a 2x4 and jammed it from the back seat up to the back of that plywood. So it created a chair back. And that's where I drove the car. And I'm all dressed up like a cowgirl. And I think I am something, you know. And one night about 2:00 in the morning, I got pulled over by the police. And I thought that I had in my head was, whatever you do, don't open the car door. Because if he sees you sitting on a milk crate, that's probably going to be a problem. And you probably get arrested. It never occurred to me that I might get arrested because I was drunk. And so this cop pulls me over and he knocks on the window and I roll down the window and he said, "Where have you been?" And I said, "Well, would you like me to tell the truth?" And he said, "We like the truth." And I started to cry. And I said, "Well, my horse died and I've just come from burying him. And it was February in Maine and you ain't burying nothing." And I didn't have a horse. But I convinced that cop that I had a horse. And I'm crying and he asked me where I lived. And I said, "I live just down the street." And he said, "Why don't you get there?" And that happened to me many, many, many times in my drinking career. I should have been arrested, but it was always like, "Where do you live?" And I was always like, "Just down the street." And they were always like, "Well, just get there." And, you know, this is a true measure of an alcoholic. I didn't have a horse, but I mourned the loss of that horse for a whole week because I heard my horse. And it's just insanity. But that was my thinking. Oh my God, you told somebody you lost your horse, you better act like you lost a horse. Who cared? Like I was going to see somebody else that heard that story. Oh, it just was insanity. And my life got crazy. It got crazier and crazier and crazier. And when my kids needed me the most, I was there the least, you know, and being a drunk mother is a bad thing. You know, it's you have no control over your alcoholism and you make that promise that you're going to make. I made that promise to myself every single day for 8 years. Tomorrow I won't drink. Tomorrow I won't drink. And tomorrow would come and I couldn't not drink. You know what I mean? So, and you never made that promise out loud to anybody. You just made it to yourself, you know. Tomorrow I won't drink. And then tomorrow would come and I couldn't make it, you know. By 4:00 I'd have to drink, you know, and then I'd make that promise again, only this time I put a timer on it. You know, tomorrow I won't drink until 5:00. And then I couldn't do that. And then I make the next promise, you know, tomorrow I won't drink till noon. And then pretty soon it was like, forget the promise. You're not going to quit. You know, just keep drinking. But I didn't like me. I didn't like who I was. And the way that I handled that was that I became a different person every day. I would get up in the morning and I would decide who I was going to be that day. And I might be Jimmy Buffett, or I might be Al Jolson, or, you know, I might be Tammy Wynette, you know, whatever got in my head when I woke up, that's who I would be for the whole day. And I would listen to their music all day. And it was insane. It was just insane, you know. I used to think I had the best ideas of anybody. I had these great ideas, you know, and one night we're all working in the saloon. It was hot, hot, hot. There were like 6 of us that I invited to go skinny dipping. I had never been skinny dipping in my life, but I thought it was really hot, it'd be a good thing to do. And we went up to this bridge in Windham, Maine, and I wouldn't jump off that bridge for $1 million, but I was drunk and it was my idea. So I had to. You know, we took our clothes off and we folded them all up and we put them on the ground next to the car. And I had this habit back then of taking my car keys and putting them on the passenger tire. I don't know who else does that but an alcoholic. But, you know, the places I was hanging out, we were practicing saying the alphabet backwards and all these things, that, you know, to pass the sobriety test the cops are going to give you. And but anyway, we jumped off that bridge and there were 6 of us. And it was like 2:00 in the morning. And when you hit the water, it's, you know, it hurts when you're naked. And but anyway, pretty soon we saw blue lights coming in. I said to my friends, I got a good idea. Let's swim downstream. So we swam downstream and we stayed downstream, treading water, waiting for the cops to leave. And finally they left. And we came up through somebody's backyard being really quiet, like 6 drunks can be at 2 a.m, you know, shh, 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 loud, you know. And we run up to the car and the cops had taken our clothes. And one of the guys that was with us was married. And he said to me, Lillie, my wife is going to be really pissed if I show up at home and my hair's all wet. And I said, okay, then I got a good idea. Get in the car, stick your head out the window. I'll drive fast and you can blow dry your hair. So we pile in the car and there's 6 of us. We're driving down the road. He's got his head stuck out the window and pretty soon the blue lights. And I said, let me handle it. And the cop comes up and shines his flashlight in the car, and there's 6 naked people. And he goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, it's really, really hot. We're just riding around trying to get cooled off." And he said, "Where do you live?" And I said, "Just down the street." And he said, "Why don't you get there?" So uh, on the night before my last drunk, October the 27th of 1989, I dyed my hair purple. And it was long before it was fashionable for people to have purple hair or green hair or any of that. And my hair came out, it was outrageously purple. I mean, if you went out in the sunlight, it would stop traffic. That's how purple it was. And I went to the bar and I told the bartender that I thought I might be an alcoholic, but I wasn't sure. And he should keep the drinks coming while I made up my mind. And sometime in the course of that night, I remember saying to this man, "I'm going to ask God to give me a sign. If I'm really, really an alcoholic, God will give me a sign and I'll quit drinking." And by now I had quit working in the saloon and I got a job driving a school bus. And what I actually was driving was a 15-passenger van. And I went out and I also had my own vans. And I got in the back of my van that night and I said a little prayer and it sounded like this: "Please, God, give me 1/10 of the faith that my mother has." I didn't say anything about being an alcoholic or give me a sign. I just said, "Give me 1/10 of the faith that my mother has." And, the next morning I got in the school bus and I picked up 15 kids and I'm driving across this country road and I started to sweat profusely. I was like, man, I was just soaking wet with sweat. And then I felt like an elephant was sitting on my chest and I thought, oh my God, I'm having a heart attack. And all I could think of was, please, God, don't let me go off the road with all these kids on this bus, And I made it to work and I collapsed. And the next thing I remember was waking up in the ambulance thinking it didn't need to be that big a sign, and then after that, I remember waking up in the hospital and I'm in intensive care and they had called my mom and my brother and my neighbors had taken my children and I'm in the hospital and I got tubes and monitors and all that. And my brother came over to the bedside and I realized that I had purple hair and I was laying on a white sheet. And he said to me, "Jesus, what happened?" And I said, "I don't know, but whatever they're giving me, it's turning my hair purple." And I knew that that was a lie, but again, I'm an alcoholic and I believed it. I really did believe that I did some concoction to my hair and it turned my hair purple and it was all the hospital's fault. The thing of it is that I had a team of doctors and they came in every day and they brought students with them and they asked me questions and they asked me how much I drank. Every day they asked me how much I drank and I told them. And I was as honest as I knew how to be at that time. And I said, I think I drank 12 beers and maybe 6 or 8 shots of tequila, but I'm not sure. But I know there's 12 beers and I know there's shots of tequila in the middle somewhere. And not one of them doctors said, "Do you think it's too much?" So then I started thinking, well, maybe I'm not really an alcoholic after all, because they don't seem to think that's too much. You'd think they'd tell you if they thought it was too much. Anyway, the date was November the 8th. It was a really cold, cold day in Maine, and I could not let my family members take me home because, you see, that beautiful house that I bought, by the end of my drinking, I had destroyed that house, literally destroyed that house. There was no carpet left on the floor. The living room was pumpkin orange. There was a dartboard hanging on the living room wall. There were no locks on the doors. There were 13 windows in that house and 13 windows had bullet holes in them. I don't know if I was shooting out, the neighbors were shooting in. I have no idea what in the hell was going on in that house. But I knew one thing. I knew that it was a pigsty because I don't do laundry. I don't do dishes. I don't do anything. I drink. Okay. Because I'm an alcoholic and that's what I do. I drink. And so I couldn't let my family take me home. So I got a friend to drop me off the end of the driveway. And when I got up to the door, there was a note on the door from the bank and they were foreclosing on my house. And I went inside and there was no heat and no lights, no running water, no groceries, no telephone, no kids. And I thought, I'm not staying here. So I went to the bar that I always drank in. And I walked in and I sat down in the same seat I always sat in. And they had my shot of tequila and my beer right there. And I doctored my hand all up to do that shot of tequila. And I looked up and there was a mirror behind the bar. It had always been there. I'd always sat in the same seat. But what I saw, and it was a split second. It's how long it takes you to snap your finger. That's how quick it was. But yet on the other hand, it seemed like a full-length movie to me. And I saw this woman sitting at the bar. And I thought, who is that woman? Oh my God, I'm hopeless. It's me. I'm hopeless and I'm helpless. And I'm pathetic and drunk. I'm a drunk mother. You're a drunk, Lillie. You are drunk. And I put the money on the bar, I put the drink down, and I walked out. And that's why I consider November 8th to be my sobriety date. I went to work the next day. I didn't know I should stay home and recover from a heart attack. I got to work, and my immediate boss had taken the time to write me a letter, and she sent me back home to read it. And in the letter, she said that she loved me very much, and all the staff that I work with loved me, and the kids loved me, and it was breaking her heart to see what was happening to me. And she suspected that I might have a problem with alcohol, and that it would be her pleasure to take me to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'd like to tell you that when I read that letter, I thought, isn't that sweet? What I thought was, why don't you mind your own business and leave me the hell alone? But remember I told you I wanted 1/10 of the faith that my mother had. This is how this story goes. I had just enough people pleasing left in me that when I came to AA, I stuck to the seat like Velcro. And what happened was she invited me to come to her house to dinner, and then we were going to go to a meeting. And I thought, I'm not going to no meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, because that's me, You come in the bar and you sit down next to me and you say you got to paint your house on Saturday, and I tell you I'm going to help you. But when it's time for me to help you, I'll still be sitting in the bar. So I got time to go to her house, and I knew that I wasn't going. And that little voice in the back of my head sounded like my mother. My mother wasn't there, but I heard this voice say to me, if you're not going to go, you should call her and tell her you're not coming. It'd be really rude not to show up. And I went to the phone to call her up, and the phone was dead because I owed the phone company, I don't even know how much money. And it never occurred to me to go to a phone booth. And for all you newcomers that are here, phone booths were like these little houses on the side of the road that had phones, and you put money in there and you dialed it like a rotary dial, and people actually answered on the other end. But it never occurred to me to go to a phone booth and call her. So I drove 15 miles to her house, rang her doorbell, and said I couldn't come. And she said, why don't you come in? And she had a gift for me. It was all wrapped up. It had a big bow on it. I unwrapped it. Never want to forget how I feel. It was a big blue book. And on the front in big white letters, it said Alcoholics Anonymous. And I remember I broke out in a sweat. And I thought, how am I going to get out of this? How in the hell am I going to get out of this, And she said, why don't you write what I wrote inside the front cover? And inside the front cover, she had written, to Lillie, my friend with love. May you someday know how important this day is to me. Fasten your seatbelt. Welcome to the greatest adventure of your life, one day at a time. That's exactly what it's been for me. I'll tell you, I went to that very first meeting. There was an old guy standing out front. You had to go. It was in a church in the basement, and you had to go down 6 steps because it's wintertime. And there's this little old man standing outside shaking like a leaf. And I thought somebody ought to get this guy a drink. He's certainly got the DTs, And he stuck his hand out to me and he said, welcome, you're amongst your own kind. And I looked right at him and I thought, oh, thanks so, bucko. And then I went inside the building, and the next person I met was as tall as the first guy was, short. And he had this great big belt buckle, and he had white hair and a big toothy grin. And he had this belt buckle. It was huge, and it was right about my eye level, and it said bullshit. And he said to me, keep coming back, honey. It gets better every day. And I thought, oh my God, this is terrible. Look at these people in here, and they were happy and they were smiling. And I went to the front of the room and smelled the coffee because I figured there had to be something in the coffee. They couldn't be that happy without drinking, and I sat in the third row in the third seat, the end seat. And this is something that we do in our group. I believe it's what saved my life and had me coming back to AA. You see, at that meeting, they went around the room. It was a huge meeting. And they went around the room, and every single person in that room identified themselves by first name and said they were an alcoholic. And when it got to me, I didn't want to not fit in. Now, I've been taking your inventory ever since I got there, and I've decided you're all a bunch of losers, and I don't want no part of it. But yet, when it got to me, I said, I'm Lillie, and I'm an alcoholic. Oh, my God, I'm an alcoholic. And they all laughed, And the thing of it is that I just thought, I can't do this, I mean, I have a disease of perception. They read how it works at the meeting. When they got to the chapter to the obnoxious, I knew they had to be talking about me, and when I told that to my sponsor, she said, it doesn't say anything about obnoxious. I said, well, yes, it does. They say it at every single meeting. She said, it's agnostic. And I was like, oh, and they said things like, keep coming back. And I thought you said, we need you. Because I looked around and I didn't think you were very organized, and I figured I'd stick around until I could become the leader of AA, and then I would get you guys all straightened out, and then I could leave AA, What a crazy, crazy, crazy lady. The other thing they do when you're a newcomer, you know, they say, you got to get a sponsor. You got to get a sponsor. You got to get a sponsor. Have you got a sponsor? You got a sponsor? All you new guys sitting around that table, you know, they're going to say to you, well, you got a sponsor? You got a sponsor? So you get a sponsor just to shut them up. You know, it's like, oh my God, all right, I'll get one, you know. And this is what I thought, because this woman started giving me good orderly direction. I thought she was a screwball. I really did. I mean, they were foreclosing on my house, and she said, why don't you call the bank and make an appointment with the manager and go up there and tell them that you're an alcoholic? And I'm thinking, what the hell is wrong with you? You think that's going to work? And so this is, honest to God, this is my truth. I actually thought that they had a school where smart people in AA went to the school to become sponsors. And those of you that weren't quite up to par were the spies. And so the sponsor would give you some ridiculous task to do. And the spies would be looking out for you, you know, and if you didn't do what they said, they'd report you, you know, and then you get kicked out of AA. Well, by now I was having a little bit of fun going to these meetings. I didn't want to get kicked out. She said, go to the bank and make an appointment with the manager. And I did that. And she said, when you get done, you call me up. So I went to the bank and I told the manager I was an alcoholic. And he said, we know. And he said, we don't want your house. And I thought, well, I don't want it either. I mean, it was a shambles. It was a shambles. And he said, do you think you could pay us $80 a month until you pay the money that you owe, that you're behind? And so I said, yes, and I could do that. And so then I went and I called my sponsor, and she said, well, how'd it go? And I said, well, they don't want my house. I said, I don't want it either. And she said, well, you're going to want it someday. So she said, what happened? And I said, well, you want to know if I could pay him extra $80 a month? And I told him I could. I said, so what do I do now? And she said, pay him. She said, if you have to go without cigarettes, if you have to go without coffee, you go without so that you can give that man his money. And I'm going to tell you something. I went there every single month with $80 in cash, and I would only give it to him. And I got to the bank got to laugh. That would be the last day of the month. And they'd say, Lillie should be coming in any time now with her $80 in cash. She won't give it to anybody but the manager. But that's what I now start taking everything you say literally. I said, what do you people eat in AA anyway? She says, well, she said, you know, if you think you want to drink, you should try eating some ice cream. Well, I ate ice cream for the first 30 days. I ate Klondike bars. That's all I ate, Klondike bars, morning, noon, and night in between. And then finally I said to her, well, do you eat anything else? And she said, well, do you like anything else? I said, I like popcorn. She said, well, eat that. So then I ate popcorn and Klondike bars until I met this woman, okay? So I'm 30 days sober, and I'm going to quit AA because you people are way too serious for me. You get at the meeting, you go to the meeting, and everybody sits down, and then they got to read how it works. At every single meet you go to, they read that how it works. And I'm getting a resentment because I'm thinking, what do you think? I'm stupid? I got it the first time. Cunning, baffling, and powerful. Good God, you people need to lighten up. I mean, I was like, Jesus, I can't stick around here. These guys aren't going to have any fun. So at 30 days sober, I'm going to this meeting, and I've decided that I'm going to get the blood chip. At home, the 30-day chip is red, and I called it the blood chip. And that's not what you call it, but that's what I called it. And I made up my mind that I was going to go get this red chip, and then I was going to go get drunk because I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. You people were way too serious. Well, I went to this meeting, and this woman got up behind the podium. She had a gigantic pine cone on her head, and she had it painted like a Christmas tree. And she had ornaments hanging off it, and it had lights on it. And the damn thing played like some Christmas carol. I don't remember now what it was, but anyway. And she stood at the podium, and she said, hi, everyone. My name's Ricky. And if I don't drink between now and May 1st, I'll be sober for 15 years. And I'm sitting right directly in front of her. Because you see, the sponsor that I had said, Lillie, you're a newcomer. You need to sit in the front. Sit right in front of the speaker. And I was like, oh, you know, why do I have to sit in the front? She says, because you're nosy. You want to know everything that's going on. You want to know who's with who and how'd she get her hair that way. And I wonder what color she used and where'd she get that outfit. And sit in the front row and pay attention to the speaker. So this woman identified herself as an alcoholic with 15 years. And I went, yes, you're crazy. I thought, and I thought she was wackadoodle, but I loved her because nobody seemed to find any fault with her being crazy. And I thought, well, if she can do it, I can do it, you know. And I'll tell you a story that happened. I was probably sober about 6 months. And, oh, by the way, her significant other was the guy with the bullshit buckle. And he said to us, If you're any kind of girl, she'll go in the hospital and you'll visit Ernie. Ernie's from up country and he's in the hospital and he hasn't had any visitors and you girls should go in there and cheer him up. So Ricky looks at me and she says, you meet me tomorrow at the main medical center at 1:00 and don't be late. And she said, and wear a fish hat. Well, I went home. I had one hat that looked like a fish and it was like a Jaws head. So I had that. I get there and she drives up in her big red convertible and she's got on a fish hat. She got a fish pocketbook, a fish skirt. She's a fish from inside out. She's also a trained operatic singer. I can't sing, but my mother always said to me, Lily, you know all the words. So if you can't sing good, sing loud. So I say to this woman, Ricky, I can't really sing good, but I can sing loud and I know all the words to Give My Regards to Broadway. She says, great, we'll sing that. Now, this was before HIPAA laws, right? So we go into the desk. We don't know Ernie's last name because, we're anonymous. So we don't tell anybody our last name in Alcoholics Anonymous. You got to guess, Anyway, so we go in the hospital. We ask for Ernie. Do you have an Ernie in here from upcountry? Yes, we do. He's on the 3rd floor. So we go to the 3rd floor. We go to the nurse's station. What room is Ernie in? Well, he's in that room right over there. We go in there and she says, hi, Ernie, we're friends of Bill W. And then she looks at me and she goes, hit it. And we sing, Give My Regard to Broadway. We do the whole song, right? Little dance routine. We get all done and he looks at us. He goes, who the hell is Bill W? And what's the wrong Ernie? But we sang to every Ernie in the hospital that day, and because they said, are you willing to go to any lengths to stay sober? Yes. Whatever you tell me to do, I'll do. I know it's crazy. I know you people are nuts, but I'll do it, And then this sponsor told me, she said, I want you to straighten that house out using the 3-foot method. And I was like, what's that? Where did you come up with this idea? And she said, I want you to open the front door and I want you to clean 3 feet. She said, clean the floor, the ceiling, the walls, figure out what's in that 3 feet. If you're keeping it, put it away. If you're getting rid of it, put it in the car and take it to the dump. When you get done, put a chair in that 3 feet and call me. So I did 3 feet. I slammed the chair down and I called her up and I said, what's next? And she said, tomorrow you can do the next 3 feet. And I said, no, I can do the next 3 feet right now. And she said, no, you can't. She said, because it's one day at a time and one step at a time. And I know you're an alcoholic. It took you 25 years to destroy that house. And you think you can fix it all in one day. Well, that's not how it works. She said, you're going to straighten that house out 3 feet at a time. 3 feet at a time. And, in that 3 feet at a time, I restored that house completely to what it looked like when I bought it. Beautiful home. I paid back the money I owed. I just didn't know what I didn't know. I had all the intentions of being a good person, but once I started drinking, it was like all bets were off. The hell with you. This is about me now, and I hated who I was. I absolutely hated me, and I came to Alcoholics Anonymous and I was broken, I was just so broken. And I remember that first meeting, that this is how I ended up staying in AA. This lady got up and she gave a talk. I don't know what she was talking about. I have no clue what she said. I realized today that she was talking about the first 3 steps because it's a beginner's meeting and it's still going on. And then after she got done sharing, she said, we have a way to help you start a new way of life here at the Portland group by offering you a white chip. And I thought to myself, you have got to be kidding. They're a room full of losers. They're so serious. And now they're going to give you a white poker chip for not drinking? You got to be kidding. I don't think so. The next word she said saved my life. And they were this. If you're too afraid to pick up a white chip, see me after the meeting and I'll give you one. Now, I've sat in that room for an hour. I've taken all of your inventory. I've decided you're all a bunch of losers. And now she's thrown out a challenge that if I'm too afraid, and I thought, I don't care. I'm getting up there and getting that chip. And I marched up there and got that chip, and you people said wonderful things to me afterwards. Women came up to me and gave me their phone numbers. People said, keep coming back, and what's funny is I in the beginning, I only went to like one meeting a week because I didn't know they had more meetings than that. And, but I'd go to that meeting every week and somebody would always come up to me and say, oh, you look great. You're looking better. You look good. And I live for that. I live to go to that meeting that somebody would say to me, keep coming back, Lily, you're doing a good job, because I felt like I hadn't been doing a good job for so long. For so long I wasn't going to drink, and for so long I drank every day, and my kids needed me, and I didn't know how to be mom. My idea of being mom was, the thing that happens to many alcoholic women. And that is that I get that big S on my chest. I don't need you. I don't need you. I don't need anybody. I can do this all by myself. Whenever there's a problem, I'll put my cape on and run, and bail somebody out. And you taught me that is not how it happens. You taught me 3 feet at a time, 1 day at a time, blessed beyond measure, because I never had to go back out there, and I'd like to tell you that when you come to AA, everything is hunky-dory, but life happens. Life happens, In 2002, I was asked to speak at a big conference in Cape May, New Jersey, and I had 3 kids, 2 of them alcoholic, and one of them not alcoholic, but the successful one, He always did whatever he wanted to do. He always did it, and he was good at it, And anyway, he joined Marine Corps, and he was a Marine of the cycle, and then he come out of the Marines. He couldn't get a job, and his friend called him and said, "Hey, you want to work for the Department of Defense in Washington, D.C.?" He goes, "Yeah, like they're handing those jobs out." "No, come on down on Wednesday. I got set you up with an interview." He went on Wednesday, got the interview, and he was moving on Monday. And his job was guarding foreign dignitaries, and he guarded the Pope. And I got laughing because my mother was a great fan of watching EWTN, and that night he couldn't tell us who he was guarding, but he said, "If you read the news, you know what's going on. So turn on EWTN, So they're showing the Pope. My mother, who would have been all about the Pope, said, "You'd think they'd show the crowd more often. I know Sammy's working over there, And he said the biggest thrill of his life was guarding Mother Teresa. He said, "Geez, Mom, she's a tiny little woman." But, all of us cops that had the detail to guard her, not cops, all the guys that had the detail, she wanted to meet us all, and she gave us all a hug. He said, "I felt like I was being hugged by somebody really, really holy." And then he called me one day and he said, "Mom, I want to be a policeman, and I'm going to quit the Department of Defense, and I'm going to police academy." And he became a policeman, And so anyway, in 2002, I got a call to go and speak in Cape May, New Jersey. And I called him up and told him, and he said, "I can go to that." He said, "I can take the ferry from Delaware." And he came over to Cape May, New Jersey, and he met Jerry and Jill. And I think Joe's here somewhere tonight, and met Joe. And in my big book, I have a picture of all of us. And he heard me talk that night. We raced to the top of the Cape May Lighthouse. I had him picking up white rocks on the beach. He goes, "Why am I picking up these white rocks?" And I said, "Because your crazy mother," I said, "leads one-day women retreats for women that can't go for a whole weekend. And I know I'm going to need these rocks. I don't know what I'm going to do with them, but I know I'm going to need them." And so he helped me pick up these white rocks, and he heard me tell my story, and he said to me, "Mom, I don't know where that came from, but you should keep telling your story." He said, "Because it might help somebody else that's got a problem with drinking." And 6 weeks to the day, I got the phone call that no mother wants to get. And that phone call was to tell me that Sammy had passed away. I got the phone call at 10 minutes of 2 in the morning, and at 5 o'clock in the morning, I called one other person in AA, and the next thing I knew, my house was full of people from AA. You see, I was lucky enough to have a sponsor that sponsored me into doing service work. And I was doing service work right from the beginning. And I had gone, doing district work, doing, my group, district, state, area. When my son died, I'm telling you, you people showed up in droves. You just showed up, and you were there. And you were there to support me. And at the wake, he had an honor guard, and one of his police partner came up to me and said, "Lillie, I've been to a lot of funerals for a lot of policemen, but I've never seen anybody with this many friends." And I said, "Really?" I said, "Well, they couldn't all come." And he said, "I beg your pardon?" I said, "They wanted to, but when they got here and saw all these cruises, they kept on going. They brought all these cruises from Washington, D.C., and my son had a hero's funeral, and the women in AA showed me how to stand up and stand straight, and walk behind that casket and bury him. And it was hard. It was really hard, but it's not the hardest thing I've ever done in AA. Can you believe that? You see, the hardest thing I've ever done in AA is watching somebody I love dying from this disease. Because my youngest son is a homeless alcoholic addict. And I've tried everything that I know, and I've got good sponsors now, and I go to Al-Anon, and they said if I could have fixed him, he'd be perfect by now. And I can't fix him. You know, all I can be is his mom. And I've learned the hard way that saying no, it shows more love than putting the cape on and run bailing him out, you know. And so my opinion is that the hardest thing you'll ever do in your life is watching somebody you love dying from the disease of alcoholism, because you just can't even imagine. I can't even begin to tell you the horror stories, you know, and he's still out there. So he's still out there. His name is Tommy. And if you think about it tonight, you might say a prayer for him that he finds his way back to AA. You know, he was here once. He was here for 10 years. And he has never been able to make it back since then. And that's hard to watch. It's really hard to watch. My life today, I was able to take care of my mother for 15 years. The best 15 years of my life. We had a lot of fun, and right up until her dying breath, I took care of her because she didn't want to go in a nursing home. And I consider that a privilege, and I was able to do that because of AA, you know. And today, I have a little apartment. It's got 3 rooms. It's perfect for me. You know, instead of getting in a fight with my brothers over the property, my mother's property, I just said to them, do whatever you think is do what you think she would want you to do. And don't worry about me, because I'm going to ask God to put me where he needs me. And God found me this little apartment. It's just as sweet as it can be. And it's all mine. And I got a front door and a back door, and I can come and go as I darn well please. And, well, not recently. I just had a total knee replacement, and I've been a little out of sorts with it, and really have been shown how to practice patience and tolerance in the last 3 months, I'll tell you. But I love my life, you know. I'm still involved with my home group. If I'm missing a business meeting, it's because I'm on the road somewhere, you know. I get to travel all over the country sharing my story. How that happened, I don't know. I hope that I've showed you that AA is alive and well in the grand state of Maine. And if you're ever in our neck of the woods, I hope that you'll come and visit us. All of you new guys, I saw all of you. You were here a little while ago. I guess you're still here somewhere. And all sitting around a table, a bunch of men sitting around a table. I'm going to tell you something. Same thing that was told to me. If you're new here, welcome. Fasten your seatbelt. Welcome to the greatest adventure of your life, one day at a time. Thanks for letting me share.